Welcome once again.
I'm here with Tina, who is also coordinating the physical while I'll be communicating with people online. Okay, so this workshop is organized by African Girls Empowerment Network, registered young feminine frontline civil society organization that is dedicated to reducing gender inequality by empowering and advancing women's rights for young women and girls. So this workshop is part of our effort and gender transformative approach to address growing barriers. And
so we're going straight away to introducing ourselves as speakers and participators. Okay, yeah, we have amazing speakers. You can see from the screen.
Looking at the ice breaker question, please let's answer. Thank you. I can see an answer from somebody here. Just one word. We have human rights, protection, very important.
Equality.
Equality, wow, equality. Thank you. Who is that? Yeah, you say.
Deborah and Tina.
Okay, Deborah. Thank you for that. Equality. I can see another one, respect. I like this. I like this. I can find so many new words. Respect, empathy, human right, human dignity, protection, avoiding discrimination. Wow, this is nice. Thank you. Thank you. Dignity. Wow. Patrick, thank you. Equity is very important. Thank you, Francis. Thank you for that. First speaker here online, the person of Mercy Okeke. She's a senior project officer from Get Bright. She's a senior project officer, like I said, a gender transformative, using gender transformative approaches. Mercy acts as a technical lead, coordinating the implementation of gender transformative approaches projects with the Mozambique National Partnership to End Child Marriage and the National Coalition to End Child Marriage in Nigeria. She's based in Nigeria and supports the National Partnership and Coalition country coordinators and members organization in both countries with true intervention and through choose to enhance commitment, knowledge, and capacity in gender transformative programming and advocacy to end child marriage and achieve gender equality. Mercy is an international development professional with a decade experience in leading inclusive women's health and HIV. Democracy and good governance and humanitarian intervention. She's also a master's degree in international development studies. Mercy, I don't know if you are there. Please unmute. Please let us jam our hands together for Mercy Okeke.
Hi everyone.
Hi, Mercy. Yeah.
Okay,
you're the one joining with. Okay. Yeah, Mercy. Thank you. Thanks for joining. See your beautiful face.
Thank
you. Okay. So it's nice to have you here. So I will leave you to. I don't know if you want to share your screen.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm really excited to be able to speak to everyone in the room. Like it's been said, I work with Girls Not Brides and I'm based in Nigeria. I support our members and partners in Nigeria and Mozambique. And I've done some work around gender-based violence, working with women and girls infected with or affected by HIV. I've also done some work around safeguarding. With my former organization, I used to be the safeguarding focal person for Nigeria. And I've worked with women and girls in humanitarian contexts. So in the Northeast, in some parts of Kaduna and Benue states. Today, I'll be talking about the intersection of child marriage, education, and girls living with disabilities. And I appreciate the fact that some data have been shared about women and girls living with disabilities. I'll start by giving a brief background about child marriage within the context that we live in, which is Nigeria. I've limited most of the information to Nigeria because that is the context that we live in. And to define child marriage, it is any union, whether it is formal or informal, between a child, and a child is anybody under the age of 18. So child marriage is a union, formal or informal, between a child under the age of 18 or an adult or another child, irrespective of the local context. So even if it is permissible within the different contexts that we live in Nigeria, it is still child marriage. In Nigeria alone, there's an estimated 23 million child births, and that's 40% of all the child living in Western prevalence in West and Central Africa. Niger has the highest prevalence, but because of our population, we have more child brides than any other country, in this sub-region. In Nigeria, 16% of girls are married before the age of 15, or there are women, 16% of women who were married before the age of 15, while 43% before the age of 18. You would agree with me that child marriage is very complex, but it affects women and girls disproportionately. So women and girls are more affected by child marriage than men and boys. For every boy that you see that is married before the age of 18, there are at least 4 to 5 girls that have been married or before the age of 18. And it is rooted in gender and power inequality and the belief that women and girls are inferior to boys and men. We can attest to that in the context that we live in Nigeria, that there's a lot of gender and power inequality that affects women and girls adversely as compared to men and boys. It is also made worse by poverty, a lack of education, harmful social norms and practices, including female genital mutilation or money wife in some parts of southern Nigeria, and insecurity, where parents are giving off their children because they feel that their children are safer in marriages than with them, especially when you're in communities that have been affected by either conflict, natural disaster, or communities where girls have to travel a long distance to get to school. The drivers of child marriage varies between communities, and it is different. So the causes, the implications are different when you move from community to communities. In some of the places where I've worked, I will not call names so that I will not be stereotyping any region. In some of the communities where I've worked, child marriage is fostered by teenage pregnancy. So when a girl gets married, she does not have a choice other than to gets pregnant rather. She does not have a choice other than to marry the man that has impregnated her, or to be married off to any man for that matter, because of the pregnancy. While in some other places, girls are married off, withdrawn from school, married off before a certain age because of some practices that they have. But child marriage generally and everywhere, the implications are the same. It robs girls of their childhood. It robs them of opportunities to reach their full potential. We've heard women who say, oh, if I didn't get married, I would have become a teacher, a nurse, or, something. I would have done something else in my life. And it increases the risk of poor health outcomes for women, for girls, and for the children that they have. It results in school dropouts, high rates of school dropouts, higher precedence of experiencing violence, whether within the family context or outside the family context, and limited decision making for the girls within their homes. And the challenging thing is that it doesn't just affect the girls, it goes on to affect female children that they have, because within that context, their female children might not have the opportunity to make decisions that affect them, which I have seen over and over. And even though Nigeria, so right now we'll talk about education within our context in Nigeria. Nigeria is signatory to several conventions on education, but there's limited investment in education as well as other basic public services like health, social protection, and all the others. If we look at the image on my right, bottom right, education budget as percentage of total, you will see that in 2021, the budget allocation to education was just 8.6% of the total budget. Meanwhile, UNESCO's recommendation is 15 to 20% of a country's budget. What this implies is that the quality of education in Nigeria is affected, teachers' recruitment and training is affected, availability of school amenities, whether it is laboratories, or the services that are needed for STEM education, or even basic amenities like toilets, water facilities are all affected. And eventually it affects girls. In fact, sometimes it affects the number of teachers, female teachers you have within that institution. These things that I have mentioned, in addition to other social reasons, has resulted in Nigeria having an estimated 18.5 million children out of school. Now, as you look at different journals, different literatures, this number varies, but the challenge still remains that there's over 10 million children in Nigeria that are out of school, which is a worrisome data. And of this, 60%, a whopping 60% of this number of out of school children are girls. So it means that 1 in 4 children out of school in the world live in Nigeria, because we have like this huge amount of out of school children. Save the Children's State of the Nigerian Girl report shows that child marriage is both a cause and a result of poor education of girls in Nigeria. I'll talk about that in the next few slides. And then for disability, we've looked at some data previously, but you will agree with me that children with disabilities are among one of the most marginalized, excluded, and vulnerable in Nigerian societies, whatever that disability is. So a very disturbing experience that I had was that a child with disability was, so in that community, people didn't know, people who just moved into that community didn't know that this woman had an additional child. They only saw her children who didn't have any disability. And that child was constantly locked up in the room, didn't go to school, wasn't taken care of. So she wasn't bathed every day because of her disability, and she was only brought out at certain times when people were not around. So in the night or very early in the morning, just because of her disability, which just buttresses the point of exclusion and vulnerability of children with disability. There's limited nationwide current data on children with disabilities. So it makes planning and implementation of inclusive programs challenging. Inclusive programs that will benefit children with disabilities, it makes it challenging because we do not have up-to-date data about them. In 2018, our president signed into law the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Act that endorses UNESCO's definition of inclusive education. We'll talk about inclusive education in the next slide. It's also known that more than 90% of Nigerians with disability have less than a university education, and about 30% of the over 10 million out of school children live with one form of disability or the other, which is very disturbing. So what is the intersection between education and disability? in Nigeria, we have a lot of policies that talks about, that are related to inclusive education for Nigerian children. But we all know, as with several other policies that we have in Nigeria, that implementation is the challenge. We can put it down, but putting it into action is usually a challenge for us in Nigeria. But with the laws around persons with disabilities and education, they have been focused on having special schools. And from my experience also, persons with disabilities in university education have difficulty studying other courses. You usually mostly find them in special education, whether that is what they want to do or not, because of how non-inclusive the education system is. And then we also know that special schools have very limited capacity because most of the teachers in those schools have also gone through special education. And this results in limited opportunities for children with disabilities. Like I said previously, most children with disabilities are out of school. We mostly see them on the road as beggars, and they're used for exploitation. So I like what was said earlier, that children with disabilities are more at risk of exploitation, whether it is sexual or otherwise, by their parents or their guardians. And like I had said, they're also either locked in seclusion. We also said that 95.5% of children with disabilities in Nigeria are out of school. So most policies are not inclusive. So when you look at whether it is the health policies that we have or whatever other policies that we have, they are not inclusive. In some previous work that I've done, one of the things we advocated for was the inclusivity of policies, such that even when designing health centers, persons with disabilities are taken into consideration, and there are either ramps for them or wheelchairs, or the reception desk is fashioned in such a way that a person with disability can be attended to easily. We also engaged with banks. It was a very interesting time for me because when you even go to the bank, it's difficult to get a wheelchair through that door. And when you even get there, the way their counters are fashioned, a person with physical disability in their legs will not be able to reach the counter, and that gives an added level of discrimination and exclusion from that facility. So because these laws are not inclusive, access for persons with disability is often difficult. So what is the intersectionality between child marriage and education? Child marriage, like I said, is both a cause and a result of poor education for girls in Nigeria. So if a girl is out of school, the likelihood of early, forced child marriage, whatever you want to call it, is very high. And once a girl gets married, she's more likely to stop education. And this is evidenced in the low transition rates to higher education for girls. So if you look at the NDHS 2018, you'll see that transition rates for girls from primary to secondary education is low. And then even from junior secondary to senior secondary is even lower, because most of these girls are married off during that transition phase. Eliminating child marriage is necessary for us to achieve the SDG goal 4, which is on quality education. And research shows that girls from poor households are 2 times more likely to be married off compared to girls from wealthier households, because their parents are unable to fund their education. And in the instance where they're able to fund their education, they usually fund education that are basic. They're not able to fund STEM education for girls. So when the girl says, oh, I want to study to become a doctor or an engineer, her parents are more likely, if her parents are poor, if she's from a poor household, her parents are less likely to fund that kind of education. But keeping girls in school, especially secondary school, is one of the best ways of delaying marriage and empowering girls. So there's a WHO publication that says if a girl stays in school for an extra 1 year, it is likely to result in gains for her that equates 25% of wages later in life. So you see that 1 year can make her earn up to 25% more wage as she might be earning later in life. So it shows how important education is for us. But what is the intersectionality for these three? In Nigerian societies, persons with disabilities face a lot of social discrimination, exclusions, being locked up, or basically ill treatment, and several other misconceptions. So I've worked in communities where you see people with disabilities and they will tell you the person is a witch or is a wizard or is demon possessed or something, and that is why they have that disability. Women and girls face that additional challenge, and that challenge sometimes for women and girls with disability is that they are looked as not being marriageable. And because they are seen as not being marriageable, there's a likelihood of them getting into informal marriages. And in those informal marriages, their rights are usually not upheld, whether it is their human rights or their marriage rights are not upheld because they have gone into informal marriages. Also, if investment in inclusive education does not increase, there will continue to be out of school children, which will increase their likelihood of being married off early. So whether they are children with disabilities or children that do not have disabilities, it would increase their likelihood of them being out of school, not having the skills that they need to live independent lives, and then of course being forced into a certain form of marriage. If inclusive education is not promoted, there will continue to be children with disabilities who do not have the right skills when they leave school. So they will have only the skills that they have learned in those special schools. And it will make them either not to be able to progress through the levels of education that they want to go through, or they will not be able to compete for employment with other, with children and people from other schools. And I kind of made this inference. So this is my personal opinion, that since majority of children with disabilities are out of school, and out of school makes a girl more likely of, more at risk of child marriage. And we have also said that most of the children out of school are girls. Then what does that mean for us? It means that people and girls with disabilities will continue to be subjected to different forms of discrimination, whether it is early marriage or informal marriages where they do not have any rights, or not even being able to go to school to get the skills that they need to live independent lives and healthy lives. But what can we do? What is the way forward for us? First, for me, because this is what I do, is gender transformative approaches to address the root causes of child marriage, a lack of access for girls, and even the discriminations faced by persons with disabilities, especially those inferences that, oh, this person has a disability because her mom was a witch or her father was a wizard, or she was born with, she's demon possessed, and all of those kind of inferences that people make around persons with disabilities. In fact, in really rural communities, when you go there, I've worked in some rural communities, they will not even bother take the child to a health center because they feel the child is demon possessed. And then it makes it worse for girls because they already face the existing patriarchal system that puts less value on women and girls and more value on men and boys, in addition to facing the discrimination attached to living with a disability. Educational reforms at all levels is necessary to make education inclusive instead of just special schools. So when I mean all levels, from federal education to state level education to local level education, because we have the local government education authority, we have the state schools, so we need reforms at all of that level to ensure that we're not just pushing children with disabilities to special schools, but we're giving them the opportunity to learn the right skills, especially skills that they're interested in, including STEM skills in the schools that we have. Making schools accessible, so ramps, having ramps in class, having special seats designed for children with disabilities so they are seated comfortably while in school. We need to also increase awareness for policymakers and senior education ministry officials on the importance of inclusive education. And I will say this unapologetically. We need more women in the policy spaces. We need more women who understand the plight of women and girls, who understand the plight of women and girls with disabilities in the policy spaces, so that we're making those decisions that affect us. Even within the ministry structure, sometimes when you go, all the directors are men, all the deputy directors are men, and maybe a few of them, all the commissioners are men. So how do we make decisions that will be inclusive if we continue to have leadership and decision-making processes or positions that are exclusive of women? And then we need to strategically plan for inclusive education, including capacity strengthening for teachers, whether in special schools or in other schools. We need capacity strengthening. We need to strategically plan. It will not happen. If we say it will just happen, it will not just happen.
Oh, wow, that was great. Yeah, I'm very sure our participants have learned a lot from that. In fact, I jot one or two things down from that. Thank you very much for that. I don't know if Madam Dara is online. Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, I can see that there are some questions already from what Mercy shared. Because of time, please, Mercy, you can actually help us take some time to answer those questions. Maybe answer the question. Okay. Okay, I'm asked to take one question. We have one question here already. Mercy, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the question is, how can the parents and guidance of the children with disability help them to engage in STEM education? That's a very nice question.
So can I respond?
You want to?
Okay, so I would say that the first step is in the value that is placed on children with disabilities. Sometimes some children who have I'm trying to look for the right, who are neurodiverse. So that's a new word that I learned. Children who are neurodiverse are often seen to have less capacity to learn. Meanwhile, the reverse is the case. So it starts with parents first understanding that children who are neurodiverse or who have a form of physical disability have the capacity to learn as much as any other child, maybe in a different way, but they have the capacity to learn. So we start from there first. And then secondly, okay, so I was saying that the options that parents have are not a lot in Nigeria because of the special schools that I had just talked about. So what I would encourage parents to do is that there are new schools that are coming up that are inclusive. So look out for those schools and get your children enrolled in those schools. But it starts first with you recognizing that your child, who may have a form of disability, whether it is physical or not physical, has the same capacity to learn as any other child. And then identify the right type of school, the right type of teachers for the child that would encourage the child to learn, as opposed to putting the child down. So one of my many skills is that I'm a children teacher. I'm a Christian, so I teach children in church. And I experience this a lot when other children teachers say, oh, this child doesn't know anything, oh, this child doesn't say anything, and all those kind of things. But when you engage with the children, you see that these children are fun, these children want to learn, but not the way that the other teacher wants them to learn, right? So parents need to understand this about their children and then tailor the kind of support that they get for their children to meet what they have identified in their children. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very important. Please, Bessie, thank you for that beautiful answer. So we're moving to the next item on grant. Okay, so we're talking about identifying and addressing the barrier of and difficulty facing children with disability, because this is I think the first step for us to able to help children with disability. So on this section, we'll be looking at how we can identify these children with disability or learning disabilities, and the challenge in facing children with disability education, particularly in STEM, and how we can also address this barrier and challenges facing them. So first of all, most of us, we already know the word disability. Disability is the opposite of ability. So I try to break it down into two. That's ability, okay, sorry, into two. That's in the personal definition of disability and the societal definition of disability. First of all, we have ability. Ability simply means being in possession of the means or skills to do something. That is the power you have to do something. And also, I also define here being able to do our normal day activities like learn, read, write, work, eat, talk, dance, and so on. So when we can't do all these things, we are termed disabled. So I'm very sure some of you will now ask me, okay, what if I have a chronic headache or a leg injury? Does it make me disabled? If this condition you are in now, you are not able to work or or learn or think properly, then it increases the chances of you being considered disabled, because you need every part of your body to function well before you are able to do something. So the note here is that disability varies. It either with a short time or long time. It depends on what is happening to that particular person. Okay, the society perception of disability is abnormal. When they say a person with disability, they see that person as being abnormal. You see the person, when you say abnormal simply means deviating from what is normal, usual, typical in the way that is undesirable or worrying. That is somebody behaving not in the normal way. If you look at the screen, you will see we have somebody online already, which is supposed to take us in the life experience to share a life experience of what she has experienced as a parent to two three disabled children. So I'll be allowing her to take this section first because of time. Then I'll come back to my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good morning.
Okay. Good morning, ma'am.
Very good morning to everyone. Sorry, I was a bit late. I was here earlier, but then I couldn't gain access because I wasn't allowed access into the class. Good morning again. Since you can all hear me, maybe we'll just ask me whatever questions you might have in the comment section. I'll be able to take it. I can't hear anybody, so let me start. Okay, so how do I start? A lot of people know me as the woman who has two children who have a rare genetic condition, and that's how I make my friends. It's about, oh, I know you. I've seen you in a BBC interview, and a lot of people don't even know what I do as a broadcaster. They just know me as that, and that is how fate, life has thrown it at me, and I've tested it. Now, I'm talking from a personal experience. Ordinary as a young girl, I wouldn't believe in a million years that I would fall in that category and be called like that, and anybody would tag me as a mom of two children with a rare condition. But then here I am. Okay, so I met my husband. We started when I was in the second year in the university. So it wasn't like I was following different people and then this fellow me. So and then he was the only person I was with for 7 years before we got eventually got married. So and then we stayed for 2 years, waited 2 years before we fell pregnant. Eventually, when you have gotten married, everybody expects that you get pregnant. So I was really under a lot of pressure. And then I was pressuring myself, not as if society was pressuring me. So I felt like, okay, so I need to do something to show off this relationship. So at the end of the day, Sha, I fell pregnant with myself. We fell pregnant with my first son. And then on the day I gave birth to him, it was at the General Hospital in Surulere, Lagos there. And immediately I gave birth to him. I just brought after because that night it was crazy. Everybody that gave birth, immediately you give birth to your child, they tag the child and hand the child over to you because we were over 200. Some people even were sleeping on the floor. So it was really very difficult for all of us. So when they handed the child over to me, as a first mom, I didn't really know something was wrong. All I was concerned was that they should not swap my child with somebody else's. And so I was very cautious. It was when immediately I gave birth to him, it wasn't up to 2 hours, they sent us back to the general ward and asked me to take him to go and sleep. But one thing I noticed was the child was extremely hot. He was crying. And the child was not looking like any normal child. Like I've seen newborn babies before then. But then I was thinking that, okay, so maybe it's just that kind of scenario that, okay, Breeze has not touched the child. When the child goes out, the child will be different. So all through that now, when I took the child back to the general ward, the child was crying, crying. So one of the women there who was already had experience with other children came to me and was like, why is he crying this much? Give him breast milk. And like, I'm not, no kind of breast milk is coming. I cannot lactate. She said, okay, take the child back to the nurses. There's something wrong. And that was when my heart, it jumped into my mouth. I was like, how can something be wrong with the child that I just gave birth? So I took the child back to the nurses and they screamed and like, why is the child hot like this? Where did you take the child to? What did you do with him in the space of 30 minutes to give the child back to you or 1 hour? What did you do? And like, I didn't do anything. You gave me the child, I took him back and then brought him when somebody said he was hot. And so they were really miffed and angry and everything. So they checked him. You won't believe they checked the child that was actually extremely hot. If you touch his body was going to, the fire was going to come out immediately. And this child was normal, 37 degrees, and everybody was confused. And so the nurses felt okay. So before they run any test on him, maybe he was infected while coming out from the womb. So let them place him on antibiotics. As at this time, the child hasn't eaten anything because I wasn't lactating, so they couldn't breastfeed him. So he was crying. So I thought he was hungry. And the cries were beginning to get to me that night. Luckily enough, there were not enough beds, and I was okay according to the nurses. So they discharged us the next day. When we got home, it got worse. I brought him back. They started administering different doctors, different nurses, different tests, different this, different that, different antibiotics. We started going from that general hospital. They referred us to another general hospital where they said they had people who could take care of situations like that. Then they moved us to another general hospital, and we kept moving and moving until we landed at Luth. At that time, I really wasn't, because I was really ashamed of the child. You needed to see the child. It was looking like one lizard. God forbid, forgive me, but that's the best description I could come out of my head at this point. It was looking very scaly, very small, like a child you could put inside one come and carry around. And I was very ashamed. And like, okay, I've carried this child for like over how many months now? This child is still the same thing. So it was when we got to Luth, I was told by a consultant that have I ever heard about any condition called ectodermal dysplasia. Trust me, in my life, I've never heard anything like that. I was as shocked as everybody, the student doctors who were there, because they too, a lot of them haven't heard about it. It was like my case was the first time they would experiment with anything like that. So we all got into school, and this consultant from the UK started educating us on ectodermal dysplasias and told me to go and read up on it. And then while I was there, they said that okay, so I have the privilege of having another child. If this child was not going to survive because it was extremely hot and it was convulsing at every turn, so and there was nothing they could do about it. So and it was not going to grow up to be like other children. So they prepared our minds, but they didn't prepare me for what I was going to see on the internet. So eventually I saw the child, and I was really, really heartbroken with what they told me. So I decided to go and do some research on the internet to find out what exactly ectodermal dysplasia is. Hey, when I saw other children who had this condition for the first time, I broke down and cried like my life ended that day. I cried because I couldn't believe that human beings could look like that. This person was not looking like a real human being. Was looking.
I'm using your plug.
So I got pregnant with the second one, thinking that would help my case. And at the end of the day, hello, can I go on?
Go on, we can hear you, Ma.
Okay, okay. So eventually, at the end of the day, I did get pregnant with the second son. The first son was 6 months. So I was like, God, please help me. At least if this one is not going to survive, the second one would. So I gave back to my second son when the first one was 1 year and 3 months. And he was everything his elder brother wasn't. He was big, he was fine, he was he was that, I was very happy. And we're in the hospital, and eventually he came out. He started gasping for breath. He was placed on oxygen immediately. And before you know it, he we stayed in the hospital for 14 days. And by the time we left, he was like his brother. And I was like, what is this? I didn't really, really dawn on me that there was a big problem at that time. So I started looking for solutions. And then I stumbled on an article that said that I saw both the boys had the same symptoms. I saw for the first time they both have the same symptoms. And that was when I knew I was in big trouble. So we started going from one hospital to the other, started going from one place to the other, trying to get solutions. There was no solution anywhere because unfortunately, ectodermal dysplasia is like sickle cell anemia. There's no cure for it. You just only have to manage the child. Trust me, I don't even want to start telling you all that my eyes saw and the things that I experienced in that period. But all I know is that in the course of trying to save my children, I lost myself. I entered into depression. I became a shadow of myself, and I suffered. I suffered beyond words. Most of the time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I started living in denial. Living in denial was one of the first thing that I knew I was doing. And then for 10 years, I was like that. No, I didn't take my children anywhere. I didn't let them go visit anybody. Some days we'll be in the house and I would just say, why don't you just die? That was how depressed I was. Why don't you just die and let me be free? Why don't you children just give me peace? I won't let you come visiting. Nobody came to my house, even my close family, relatives, my in-laws. And if you want to come visit me, I prefer to come to your house so I won't have to bring my children. I'll say I'm coming from work. I couldn't bring my children so that I'll hide them away from the rest of the world. And I was like that. I was living in that bubble, that illusion until one day my eldest son came back from school and actually told us that they called him a vampire in school. And then the teacher brought him in front of the whole classroom, and the classes started dancing and clapping for him. And at that point, my son said he wasn't going to school anymore. it wasn't even the one who told her. It was his younger brother who said that they brought my son out in class, and then they embarrassed him in school. So when he said that, I said to myself, okay, so this is the time for me to come out of my shell because my children will suffer. I am already in the world, I've not died, and this is happening. And I go around advocating for people, talking about other people's issue, looking for inclusion, looking for disability inclusion for other people. Who will talk about my children? Who will tell the world that there are people like them that people don't know about? A lot of people didn't know about ectodermal dysplasias until I started talking about it. And so I said, what's the best way to start talking about this? And I realized that's something I love to do, and that's to write. It's like I sit down, and if I start writing, it's like it's like therapeutic for me. I write, and then it helps me heal. So I went back to those days when I started writing, and so I called this writing "Broken but Beautiful." And so I started. So I
Hello,
started
can you
telling
hear
my
us?
story.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, I
I
can.
want to to emphasize on this. You mean that the child was brought out from the classroom and placed in the front of the student, and they
Mm,
were dancing, making mockery of him. I want to be clear.
yes, yes. They brought him in front of the classroom. And then the teacher said, don't people not see how he looks like a vampire? And so they started, the whole class, they started beating drum for him and asking him to dance, that he looks like a vampire. Now, I didn't say this. Now, my children cannot stay without pouring water on themselves because of the kind of heat they generate. They don't have sweat balls. They cannot sweat like you and I. So everything else they can't do because inside is like fire. So, and so they don't have teeth. They cannot chew anything. They cannot swallow. They cannot grow like you and I. They most times when you see them, you think they look like people who have Down syndrome. It's not Down syndrome. The name is ectodermal dysplasia, and so theirs is worse than anybody who has ectodermal, who has sickle cell. It's like a combination of sickle cell, a combination of learning disorder. Is so the way he looked, the teacher felt she wanted, according to her, because we went to the school, and people say I shouldn't make excuses, but I try to make excuses so that I can forgive her and forgive myself also. So she said she didn't really say it to mock him. She said she wanted him to stop taking his bath. That in a class of 1 hour or so, my son has gone out more than 10 times to pour water on his body. And every time because that was the second time he was convulsing in school. So I told the school, please let him pour water whenever, because if he's hot like that, he's not even hearing what you're saying. He's burning from inside out. So the school agreed with me to do that. So eventually, maybe she wasn't briefed. So she said she wanted him to stop. She was looking for a way for him to stop. So she told the class to sing and dance for him and call him a vampire and tell him how ugly he was. So, unknown to her, she killed his self confidence. So, at the end of the day, when they told me, I realized I had a big problem. And that was the first time I actually cried, because I couldn't believe that people could be that mean to a child who was less than, at that point, I don't think it was up to 3 years. No, okay, no, I think it was seven at the time. His younger brother was 5. So I know people can be this mean to a child. So I decided to start telling my story. It was while I was telling my story, the broken and beautiful, that other people started coming in to say, around the world. In short, people from African countries, different from different places, who will reach out to me and like, okay, so I have this family member. They locked him up in a room. They locked him up somewhere. They don't allow him to go anywhere because he doesn't look like a human being. So they call him a snake. They call him a fish. Oh, so this sickness has a name. And so I was able to get more mothers, more parents to come out and share their experience. So what was supposed to be a mockery for me, what was supposed to be a shame for me, became my stepping stone to helping others. My pain, in my confusion, I don't have what I'm talking about. So when I started the advocacy, tell people about ectodermal dysplasia and try to open them up to the fact that so if somebody tells you that because it's you against the world, you are now trying to fight to survive in a world where nobody accepts you. So he goes into smoking hemp, he goes into joining bad boys, he goes into doing all kinds of vices. You can't blame him because society turned him into that. Imagine somebody telling you every day you're useless, you're useless, you're useless, you're useless, you're useless, you're useless. After a while, your useless becomes the watchword. You are waiting for somebody who will tell you you're useless, and then you hear somebody who tells you you're not useless. You're looking at the person strangely because for you, that's not what you want. So I started the advocacy in the course of my pain, and in the course of doing that, I realized that I was helping people unconsciously, children with any kind of disability who were just trying to navigate life anyhow. They also were drawing strength from me. So instead of me at this point to sit down and wallow in my misery and try to cry and try to feel that I'm not good enough, that this is happening to me because of one sin that my forefathers committed, or because of I didn't check my genetic, I didn't go for genetic testing to know if my husband and I were compatible, whether I have recessive gene, whether it was going to be inherited in my children. Maybe that's why this is happening to me. I decided to use that energy and change other people's narratives. So far, so good. That's what I've been doing, and I've been trying the best I can because it is hard for people to come out and tell you about ectodermal dysplasias. For them, it's like I'm hiding away. I have parents who hide their children away. I have about three of them who have two children each who have ectodermal dysplasias, and they would never let me see the children. They tell me, look, madam, I will let you talk to me, ask me any question, but I don't want my children to be exposed to this life. So and I can understand it. I honestly do understand it. It's a hard, tough, lonely world that nobody's working with you. You just have to draw courage every day, support yourself, tell yourself you're doing well, even when the rest of the world does not understand, and just keep going. And at least that's been my watchword, and that's how I've been surviving ever since. So, so I think basically that is it for me. My children are doing fine. My children are doing fine. I want to believe they are. My second son has learning disability. He hardly cannot understand anything. So, but they are doing well. I like to believe. I like to stay in the positive. I like to believe. My first son just had his tooth fixed. Money to do it. It was more than almost 2 million. Where would I get money to do it? To fix teeth here in Nigeria? It was the hardest thing for me to go on the internet and start begging for my child because that was the only gift he needed for his 13th birthday. He was going to be a teenager, and the girls in his class were making jest of him. And he told me, if you are going to do anything for me in this world, I will never ask you for anything again. Please get me tea. And so I went on the internet, looked at my bank account or civil servant, and it was as lean as anything. And I went to the internet and I put my shame aside, put my profession as I be speak Turenchi one side, and went on my knees to beg, please help me help my child. And as God would have it, God raised people on the internet to help me give him a tip. So I don't know who my story is for, and I don't want you to pity me and do a yeah, yeah. No, I am supposed to be a source of inspiration. I think God brought me this far so that I can inspire people. So that is my story, and of course, I'm willing to answer any question that you might have, if you have any. Thank you so much for letting me come here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ma.
Thank you.
Really inspiring. In fact, you need to set up as plan on offline here. They are really inspired
Uh,
by not easy.
uh,
Every woman or parent go out there because of their disabled child, Thank you for your time. Yeah, but if you have a question, you can actually drop it on the chat box while move forward. Okay, if you're just joining us, you can scroll through. I will still drop the link for you to give your view on a free assessment link for you to fill. Okay, so before now, we add Messi Okeke. Mercy Okeke, who shared with us the link and the intersection of child marriage education and girls living with disability. She really broke it down for us how child marriage and girls really connect with girls living with disability, and she showed how their education have been affected. Okay, and now we had Mrs. Ndara, who shared with us our experience so far with our children. We can see having two children with the same disability, and she's facing the world and she's supporting these children. This is what most parents supposed to do: support and care for them. Okay, so also I would like to bring the introduction with regard to introduce our partners from Save the Child, Save the Children Nigeria. I don't know if you're online. Please say hi to. Please, are you online? Save the Children International. Okay, I think. Yeah, I see so many activities going on online. Mrs. Dara, thank you very much. Thank you. Your story has really inspired a lot. So I'll move on with my presentation before.
Madam, it was your story is inspirational, and I just don't know how to give my own but on behalf of the coalition of civil society organization and early child marriage, I want to say thank you very much for sharing this story. And
Thank you too.
and on behalf of my own organization, that is the Child and Youth Protection Foundation, I also want to say that I hope that age will be able to connect the two of us after this webinar, and so that we can look at ways of actually putting the coverage child has the right to decent living. And when children are married, we have various organizations across the country that are members of the coalition that are doing a lot of, proud of what it is doing. We're proud of the speakers, and I want to appreciate our who is a friend of the coalition. Thank you very much, Ma, for that presentation. And I just want to say that the coalition is also ready to partner with any organization that is on this particular call on ensuring that we end all forms of child education for children. And I just want to lastly say,
I'll finish up with this presentation, then we go. We are supposed to do a quick brainstorming on the presentation for Madam Dara and Mrs. Miss Festy. Okay, sorry. So, and we are supposed to add this presentation after now, but because of time, I'll just walk through this presentation so that we'll be able to focus on the next thing we have after the break. So please, I'll pray to indulgence, please be patient with us, please. Thank you. The other time I talked about the personal, and then we were on the societal view on learning disability, which we tell abnormal. For example, Mr. Dara just gave us an example of the story of the child that is always going out to pour water. That is, the child is always going out to pour water on the body, which is not normal, right? Like almost every minute, the child is going out to pour out water. So the people, the children, the teacher, they have seen it as abnormal. Is that what the society has done it? You can see from the picture, we have a square. But when the square is now, like from the two sides, is now entering inside, it is abnormal. So what the society actually see is different from what you yourself is actually thinking. So the society sometimes they give us a picture, the cultural picture of what we should call normal and what we should call abnormal. And this it varies in different societies. Okay, moving on. So you asked me, do my abnormal behavior indicate that that I have disability? Your abnormality may be a barrier and effective participation in society as equal basis with others or with others' rights who can also be seen as disability. What I'm trying to say is that when you are abnormal, the society may time you being disabled to. That's when we talk about being marginalized, being biased about what they do to you or what they feel about you. So I believe with this term, the definition terms are giving that everybody is disabled in one way or the other. Yeah, so we are all disabled. It's just that some people who is more visible are more chronic than others, and that's why it's like that. So I will have a definition here from the United Nations Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability, which defines disability as long-term physical, mental, intellectual. Sorry, are the people online hearing me? Please, I would like to know if I'm communicating with everybody.
Yes, I think we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So they define disabilities as long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which in interaction with various barriers will hinder a person full effective participation in the society. That means if a child has a disability or impairment in the body, they actually deter the person from participating well. For example, a child that is handicapped, it's not easy. Like if you build an upstairs for a child that is handicapped, it's not easy for that child to climb that upstairs. Do you understand? So it may affect so many and participating in so many things. So you have to consider what this person can do or not to do. Okay, moving on. So we have various types of disability. Disability on its own, I break it down here into 5. That the visual, hearing, or motor disability, that the physical disability, that we have albino, that has spinal cord injury, deafness, blindness, all those things are physical, we can see them. Okay, so the next one we have is intellectual disability. Don't call it developmental disability, like the story that Mrs. Lara shared with us, that our child is having this kind of disability, which developmental, they don't grow like us. They don't grow like us, so their disability is different from their development is different from others. So we have mental disability too, where we have anxiety disorder, mood disorder, personality disorder, amnesia, environmental, cultural, economic disadvantage. This has to do with poverty, things that affect somebody not to get, like, for example, we say some girls are not in school. Why? Maybe because of poverty, the environment they are living in, like during the flood period now, some girls were not able to go to school. It's because of this disability. Okay, so we have specific learning disability, which is major problem of some of girls that are in school, apart from the fact that they are physically disabled or intellectual or developmental disabled, they have specific learning disability, which are to do with letters, words, and so on. So if you have all this disability, you may it actually can affect your education. Everything can affect your education, and that's why they say learning disabilities. Actually, among all this form of disability, the most common category of disability that affects one's education is the learning disability. And if you check every one of it, you see that it affects the learning process of a child. So what is learning disability in children? Learning disability means that a child that learning disability in children means a child struggle with one or more area of learning, which in general it affects the IQ, the motivation, and it affects every learning part of that child. Okay, this child with disability may become frustrated in mass meetings. For example, I ask you something, the child, this one is able to get, like, it's happening frequently. This child cannot master things, cannot do things, For example, we talk about our own child. I'm very sure at some point they will be telling that child something, but the child will not understand. And they thinking the child is rude or stuff like that. That oh, don't frustrate me and all the stuff like that. So this thing can frustrate that child itself. They are going through a lot, but they can't express it all. So they may, and this one may make them to act off, helpless, and disengaged also. So it doesn't mean that these children with learning disability cannot learn. It's just that their ability, they have different, their brain is wired differently. They have different way of learning. So we have to first identify this learning disability in the children. The physical one is easy to notice. When you see it, it's easy to notice that you know that it can affect this child. But when it comes to specific learning disability, it's not easy. We may be in the same class, everybody may be looking beautiful and stuff, but it may not be, what we are learning may not be entering the same level. You understand? So these affect a child learning. So this picture shows how learning disability affect the ability to receive, send, process message, to understand, do mathematical calculation, coordinate movement, and give direct attention. What we are trying to say that this learning disability is not that the child is not intelligent. It's just that the process of learning has been affected in some way. So we have to find another way for that child to learn. Do you understand? Okay, so moving on. Okay, so we can see different common learning disabilities here that most of us, I know we don't even know about. We have dyslexia that has to do with somebody difficulty in learning and in reading, I mean. We have dyscalculia, we have the difficulty in math, dysgraphia, difficulty in writing. You can see how it affects a child's way of learning. Like for example, this dyscalculia, we notice that most children, maybe particularly, I use myself as an example. I had that disability, but I had to find a way to manage with it, to learn. If not because of the help of my brothers back then, I would be very, very bad. Like maybe I wouldn't even graduate school. So you understand? They notice that I'm not just, no matter what, I can be good in the other subject, I can pass it. But this mathematics, this calculation, even when you give me money, I didn't have time to calculate it. Just give me money, let me go in. That's it. So it affects way of learning. Just imagine a child like that in school, and if it's not properly taken care of, you can't learn. So please, the next slide, please. These are also other disability disorder or learning disorder. We have this partial difficulty with language. There are some child very hard. And if you notice that some of these disabilities that are listed on this, you notice that some of them they have connection. Like for example, me, I wasn't able to speak till I was around 4. You understand? I was around 4 years old, and even that 4 years old, when you hear me speak, I was just saying nonsense like my mom at least stop him. So people started marking like, yeah, this child is not dumb and deaf and dumb like it. Like they started calling me names and stuff like that. I remember my mom actually getting worried about me. And even when I was going, she was always paying attention to the way I do things. So these things, they may not be visible, like the physical disability, but it has a lot of disadvantage to us as a child if it's not well taken care of. And that's why it's very important for you to identify this disability. There are some other disabilities that are not specific learning disability, like we have the attention deficit hyperactive disorder and autism. This HDHPD is very common in little children. Why they can't sit down one place to learn, like it's not just there. No matter how they want to read, their mind is not there. It's just moving anyhow. This thing happens in most of our children, and we just keep this child to life play and stuff like that. You may not know that are endangering the learning process of that child. You have to. There are some processes that you need to follow for this child to be able to learn. You understand? This thing affects the learning. So autism too. This autism, most people don't even know about it. This autism affects the way a child communicates, the child reads, the body language. For example, I will be saying something and the child is understanding another thing. And you'll be like, you can't read, and the child is laughing. That's what, when I call something abnormal, you'll be like, the child is abnormal, you're laughing. I'm telling you something, you are laughing. You are rude. I bet get out. All those sort of things. That's what we normally do. Please, the next slide, because of time. So you may be asking, what are the causes of all these things? Madam Dawa was trying to bring her story. She was saying something like that. You see that it's my sin or their father's sin, or maybe they inherit it from somewhere or stuff like that. Most of the causes is either genetic, that means it runs through the blood. So if you have a child like this, if somebody have a kind of disability in your family, there's is it probability, yeah, that you have a child that have that same disability. So it's very possible. Also, another thing is during pregnancy. We have so many problems, like maybe during pregnancy, you have delay in birth, or abnormal, what are they calling it? These quick birth, premature birth, and stuff like that. It can actually affect that child. So children too, when they born them, their weight is abnormal. You need to check what this thing can affect the brain, because sometimes this thing affect during the birth process, it can touch their brain and affect them. So we have to watch out. So another cause is accident. Maybe after birth, through accident, we have malnutrition. Just a child that is not eating, how can it think, how can it learn well? It can affect, maybe you are even giving the child different kind of food that is not supposed to eat. Maybe our health is not good for it. It can affect the child way of learning. Also, exposing the child to a toxic environment is also bad for please, next slide, please. So through our work and various visitations to school, we have noted that children with disability or learning disability are educationally constrained, most especially in STEM education. And you can agree with me that more than 10,000 children with disability in Ogun State, southern in Nigeria, are suffering from all forms of exclusion, barrier, violence, which may affect them in different ways. It affects their education, their career, and also their inclusion in the society. So females with disabilities suffer more exclusion in STEM education. Again, we talked the other time, data the other time, that girls, females participation in STEM is very low. And one of the major causes of this thing is this disability. Just imagine when a girl cannot properly learn how to calculate. How can it be in a science class? So all these things affect the woman. So the open screen, according to you, MUC, that was shared all the time, female enrollment in STEM subject is at average of 20% in Nigeria. Just about the 20%. That's very, very low. And one of the major causes, like I say, is disability. So females with disabilities suffer more exclusion in STEM education. Why? Through our campaigns, girls, through our STEM Girls Initiative, we are finding out in Ogun State here that girls with learning disability, the STEM related course, especially maths, which I may mention, mathematics is the major problem. I remember I had to drop to art class because of my counselor was like, yeah, I'm not sure you can do this thing. Are you sure you can do this thing? Just go to art class. I remember I wanted to be a doctor, but she changed my class to art class. And I was in the art class, and I was just going on. So what happened was that she canceled me, but assuming my parents were able to step in, like she can. But I wasn't sure of myself. So I was okay, since yes, this match myself, they give me a headache, let me just go. Do you understand? So major reason why most girls drop out of the science class is one is mathematics and other related courses. Okay, so they're also affected by the environment, like children abusing, experiencing violent child abuse and stuff like that. It may affect their learning process, affect them mentally, which will affect their education too. Some of them also lack mentoring and mental support, mental health support. Just imagine somebody that is going through that wants to become something in STEM education, but there's no mentor. You don't even have anybody in your family. Just your family, your father say, okay, be a doctor. You don't know the process of becoming this doctor. So that's some of the reasons why most girls don't go into STEM courses. Okay, so challenges these children face from the key players of education. I'll start from the parents. The parents, sometimes there's no support for them. Just imagine Ms. Lara share a story of our children with disability. When they started, she was keeping them inside, like, don't go out, don't do this one, don't do that one, and stuff like that. And she wasn't really supporting it. She may be doing it quietly. She was worried, but at some point, she see the need for her to support and bring out this issue out. And that's what actually thereby she's living life in life. One thing is that as a parent, with children with learning, it affects us. We are the first people that the thing we affect, even before they affect the child. So it affects us. So for your own mental health, you need to support the child. You need to care for them. Another thing is they are ashamed of them. They call them names. They dog them in school. Teachers too, they get tired of teaching them. Some of them are not professional. Some of them call them dumb, useless, and they ask them to just get out and so on like that. The school authority too, they did not create an environment, an inclusive environment for them to learn. And also they employ non-professionals and do not provide adequate training for the staff and institution, especially they do not institute safe policy, which one of our speakers will be telling us about, say, keeping safe policy in schools and home and so on. Okay, so this learning disability does not only limit the educational outcome of a child, it's also limit the social behavior of a child. What am I saying? Through stigmatization and discrimination, this is very common. Just imagine a child that has Down syndrome, and any small thing, maybe they will just be recording, they'll be laughing at the child and stuff like this. Thing affect that child. This discrimination, they'll be feeling somehow, they will just want to stay somewhere because they don't want to relate with other children again. They go through bias, even at home. Some parents place other children without disability first before the children with disability, so it affects them. We have our social norms, which people are already in our culture, and if you go against it, they affect other. So when a child is not behaving the way the society wants it to behave, it affects them. So they believe that they are not supposed to be in this setting. Just imagine when we are gathering like this, maybe it's a very high class this thing. If a disabled child now come in, be like, what is it doing? Like everybody face will be like, or on that person, because we feel like this person is not supposed to be here. Okay, we have violence, abuse, and disenfranchised. All this we are saying are the things that affect these children's disability. And all these things, if you look at the diagram there, you see a child when the parents say, don't tell anyone, anybody wants to know, stay at home. You hear it's really not the same head that Jim has or something like that. Yeah, in one way or the other, you are causing a kind of depression. And this child is being bullied in school, being mocked, and so on like that. So this thing can lead to the child dropping out from school, child marriage, as Mercy earlier mentioned, low self-esteem, depression, on equal, full, and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others, and a cycle of poverty. When I say cycle of poverty, just like when a child is not educated, what do you expect from that child? So everything you always say about that child is useless. At the end of the day, the child is not having, it's just becoming more dependent on you, and it's increasing the level of poverty in our society. So it's very, moving on, it's very important for us as children, as parents, as key players in this education to come together to address this issue. And I'll be sharing with us some of the ways we can address the issue. One is to identify. If you don't know a child's disability, it'd be very hard for you to know how to address it, right? And that's why I try to define and show different kind of disabilities so that we're able to identify this disability among children. So we have, I think we are, like I mentioned here, identifying your child or student learning disability at the early stage is the key, is the foundation of addressing the child disability. So when you find out that some of us, we find it that, especially this specific learning disability, we find it hard to identify them. So how can we identify this? Please, can you note down this? So we have some signs and symptoms. When you give birth to a child from the age of 1 to 5, you should take note of this. If you take note of this, we have the problem of pronouncing, like you can see some of the trouble finding the right word, difficulty in rhyming, trouble learning alphabet, numbers, color, shapes, or days of week, difficulty in flowing direction. You can't do this when you're always moving up and down, like the child doesn't have control of himself, and have difficulty in actually using some items like crayon, pencil alone. But okay, when the child is around 5 to 9, you should take note of how the child connects word and sound together. We should take note of how the blend sound together, how they find themselves confused when they get things. For example, we talk about a child, maybe we say something like dance, door. A child may be hearing the same thing at the same time. Door, dance. You ask the child to write what you say. It will be that dance, maybe the child will write. You understand? So we should take note of this thing. If a child can't speak, so what we are trying to say is this learning disability is different from a child being intelligent. What we are saying is that a child can be intelligent, but the way the child is supposed to learn is different. So you have to identify these things for you to be able to teach them properly. Next one, please. From the age of 10 to 13, you also see some difficulties in reading. At this age, a child should be able to pronounce words, like should be able to read, at least, if not fluently, at least to a little bit. You understand? So if you notice this thing, you have poor handwriting. You know, having poor handwriting is also a bad thing. It affects, in fact, I've seen when we were marking this white listing, a child, after writing the whole this thing, we couldn't mark it. How do you want us to grade that kind of child? So the handwriting too, you should take note of it. The way the person attends to homework, things in school, maybe the child is disordered, and so all that things. You can see most of these things list on the screen. Okay, moving to the other one is support. When you identify this thing, all you need to do is support. That support, love, and care for this child. It goes a long way for you to handle these challenges. How can you support this child? Making this child to know that this is your disability. There's no need to deny it. There's no need to deny it. I have this disability, and it doesn't mean it defines who that child is. I have this disability. You have this disability. It doesn't define you. So you have to find a way to find the weakness and the strength of this child. What will this child do that? What is this child bad at? Once you are able to identify that, you are able to support this child. Also, some other thing is to understand, for them to understand their rights and responsibility. They know that you are supposed to do this just like any other child. You're supposed to wash plate. If you can't do this thing, do that one. You need to understand. You need to communicate with your child. Let your child tell you what is passing through. Mom, I have a problem with this. Listen. We parents, most of the time, we have issues. We have issues this communicating with our child, and because of it, we will not be able to support or help them. So we need to make them to have a high self-esteem, know that life has meaning, and they have a positive contribution to make to the family, to their school, everywhere they find themselves. Is very important. The third one is cooperation. This cooperation is the most important one, apart from identifying. Just imagine a parent has identified this. It's for her to communicate with the necessary people that are teaching, like in a school, which, like, for example, Ms. Dara told us about the child in school. She was able to communicate that this is the problem what the child has and stuff like that. Communicate this problem to the school authority. Let them know about it so that the teachers, the school authority, and other people can come in support. For example, when she went out there to talk about the disability of the child, that I need help. Other CSOs, other people that have experienced that, they came out to also support her, to tell them that their experience, and was able to help her. So it is very important for us to come together, to cooperate, and to work. They say a child, for every child, a village. I don't know how to put that in. It takes a village to train a child, but a child with special or disability, special needs or disability, it takes every hand to be on deck, whether you are a village member or not village member. Just put your hand on deck to train that child. So it's very important. And the next one we have the provision of necessary resources and facilities. Schools, apart from schools, parents, everybody need to provide the necessary resources that child have. That, for example, the money, for example, the building of the school, is it accessible? You are taking your child to a school. Is the school accessible for this child to study? Is it easy from, okay, like the road from there to be like a child that is physically challenged? How do you expect the child to go in to school, even if it's alone? You have to check that. Even the school, you have to check the environment. Is the school comfortable and the environment comfortable? And also, we need to make provision of so many other resources for the child to learn, like storybooks, textbook, things that will help the child to learn. And the technology have actually introduced some what they call assistive technology, AT. This will help the children. For example, a child may have a problem reading some things. This assistive technology help the child to read very well and effectively. So if they are a parent, a caregiver, please make use of this technology to help them. And of course, schools should employ qualified and not overwork their staff. Please, it's very important. When a staff is overworked, it's the child that the thing affects. So it's very important. Last but not the least, yes, the last but not the least is the safety policy. Every school, at home, everywhere we find ourselves, we need safety policy. This safety policy will help us to guide the way we communicate with these children. We end discrimination, we end stigmatization, the biases that the children go into, the exploitation that they go through. It will help us to end this. And of course, my conclusion is that children with disability are not stupid, lazy, or useless. They just have challenges that's affecting their receiving and processing of information because their brain is wired differently. And so children with disability are not just intelligent, but they all need our support. They are all intelligent, I mean. and they all need our support as key players of our education, and is more advisable for us to identify this learning disability on time for us to be able to support the children. And I believe that if all this is addressed, we'll be able to make these children with disability will be inclusive in STEM education, in leadership, in the economy, and of course, most importantly, partners to achieving the UN SDG by 2030. So I plead with everybody here that if we have a child or we have somebody that has a child with disability, we should not look down on that person, but see them as part, just like normal children, as we see every child every day, so that it will help them to grow, to learn, and to be part of the society. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Marty, for such a wonderful presentation. And we are coming back for brainstorming and for coming up so that we can come up with the action plan. But we have our senior partner in the house for our mother organization, the National Coalition of Civil Society Organizations to End Child Marriage in Nigeria. And he is also the senior program person for the Child and Youth Protection Foundation in Abuja, Nigeria. And Martin will do the needful. Please, are you on the standby? Mr. Kola, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm here with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for still joining to this moment. Thank you, Mr. Kola. Sorry, we are really taking your time. I know that you're dancing. So I would like to share my screen to introduce Mr. Kola to us all. Our Honorable Mr. Kola. Sorry, let me share my screen. Currently the National Coordinator or Senior Program Officer at Child and Youth Protection Foundation, and also the North Central Board representative of the West African Network for Peace Building. He has facilitated many pieces of training nationally on child protection and youth engagement, and he has a strong passion to ensure that society creates an enabling environment for the development of children and youth. A facilitator of Tosan Training Center in Texas, Senegal, and the central focuses on building the capacity of community members for community well-being. He is the co-chair of the coalition of CSOs on ending child marriage. He's also a member of some national committees that focuses on child labor, child rights, and child marriage. Coordinated the development of the CSO supplementary report on the Nigeria Second and Third Public report, the African Union Committee or experts on the rights and well-being of the child. Also led the delegate that represent the report to the committee expert at the 31st section of APRWC. Mr. Kola O. Adenola, the National Coordinator of the Program Officer is CYP. We are happy to have you here today. Thank you for coming. Please unmute your mic and take your things now. Please, a round of applause
Okay.
for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Age Network, for this particular opportunity to have me talk. I'm not lecturing, I'm not facilitating, and I'm not presenting any paper. I just want to talk about safeguarding and protection policies in schools and at home to protect children. I want to just first of all to protect all children, especially children living with disabilities against all forms of violence. Now, I've listened to three presentations on this particular call, and I must say that it's very, very informative. And one of the presentation done by Ara, the mother with the two kids, it's inspirational, and it shows that there's a gap in the system in Nigeria when it comes to safeguarding and child protection policies. Now, if you have listened to the news severally in Nigeria, you will have seen so many schools um, being culpable of causing harm to children by neither intentional or unintentional. And because of that, we need to have an understanding of what the child safeguarding policies are and what child protection policies are. And the last presenter did make mention that all schools and all institutes and all organizations that work with children must have a safeguarding standard and also have a child protection policy. This is very key. But I just want to define. So my job this afternoon is very minimal. Uh, it's just to define what the safeguarding policies are, what is safeguarding, and also define what is child protection. And then I will talk about some elements that we need. And then I'll speak specifically to teachers and parents. Number one, what is safeguarding? Now, safeguarding is just the action that is taken to promote the welfare of children and their protection from harm. That's safeguarding. So whether you are in school, whether you are in the home, whether you are in the community, you start talking safeguarding, you start thinking safeguarding, whether you are in the mosque or in the church. Safeguarding is to ensure that you take actions to promote the welfare of children and their protection. You know that when the madam was sharing her story, and he said the teacher called the child out in school and allow other students to be singing for the child and mocking the child. That is an abuse. And so, if that school have a safeguarding policy, that will not have happened. Now, what is child protection? Child protection is also the action that would take to prevent, mitigate, respond to individual incidences of abuse, neglect, or violence. So, safeguarding will take action to promote the welfare of the child and their protection from harm. Now, protection is the action we take to prevent, mitigate, respond to individual incidences of abuse, neglect, and violence. And because abuse, neglect, and violence are the three major aspects where children are affected. Now, let me begin to make emphasis here on children living with disabilities. Why is it that it's very important for us to be able to look at? Because the rate of vulnerability of children living with disabilities is higher than with normal children. It's normal. It's higher. So normal children are also vulnerable, but children living with disability, mobility disability, intellectual disability, emotional disability, any form of disability on the spectrum, their rate to their vulnerability rate to abuse is higher. And that is why we must begin to ensure that schools that are handling children with disabilities, NGOs, CSOs, CBOs, churches, if I start asking the question here, how many of our churches have a child protection policy? Most churches somebody will just come to church today, I'm filled with the Spirit of God, I'm a Sunday school teacher, and then you handle your children over to them. And like many of us parents have had issues with Sunday school teachers, the way they handle our children. So these are the steps. Now, what are the four main elements of child protection? As parents, as school teachers, we must be able to understand. One, the first element of child protection is prevention. The best element is also prevention, the ability to prevent, to ensure that we have things in place to prevent any forms of abuse. Now, when it comes to children with disability, one of the first prevention procedure is to know that the environment is conducive for the child, that the child can move around, especially children that have mobility disabilities. In 2015, the Disability Act was passed by the federal government, and it says that all schools and all government agencies and vehicles must have ramps. Up to now, how many of our public facilities have ramps? How many of our homes that have children with disability live have ramps. So preventing children, and then if you know that your child has ADHD, you know that you have to make sure that there's no broken bottles around. You are putting a sharp object around. You know that most of your sitting room settings are not with sharp and blunt edges. Those are things that we do consciously to prevent the madam, because she said, I went on the internet and I studied. As caregivers, as practitioners, as parents, as teachers, we cannot protect children with disabilities from abuse if we are not knowledgeable. So parents must begin to find time to have understanding. And so I think it's one of the things that we need to start doing, and age is doing this. This is wonderful. To increase the knowledge base of parents and everyone that is having contact with children. It's very, very critical. If that teacher have known that you don't do that to a child with disability, merely looking at the child, you know that this child have disability, that you don't mock the child. But because she's not knowledgeable, she can't protect the child. Number three, element is what we call support. We must begin to build a support system in our homes, in our communities, in our offices, to support children with disabilities. I'm talking children generally, but my focus this afternoon is on children with disabilities, because they need more of our protection, they need more of our prevention services, and they need more of our support. There are several ways to support a child with disabilities. Extra time in writing exams. If you're giving every normal child like 1 hour, you give them 1 hour, 30 minutes. The ability to let the child go and have more showers. That is, the school must have showers. Should be appropriate and proportional to the risk the child or children faces. And let me just give you a typical example. A child living with mobility disability, and you want to start providing safeguarding measures, and you went to the stream, you locked all the rooms, you locked the child inside. You say, I don't want the child to fall down, but you denied the child access. You blocked the windows, you blocked the room, you locked everywhere up. The child can't even have access to the toilet. You say, if I'm not around, if he goes to toilet, maybe he will injure himself. The safeguarding procedures and response you have provided is not proportional to the risk the child is facing. What you can do, from the example I've given, is to ensure that there are ramps by the steps, or there's a gate, a checker gate by the step, or you know that the toilet, the child may fall in the toilet, so that the toilet is padded, or the toilet is elevated. And so we don't go to the extreme. And one of the extreme, the madam that gave us a story gave, was that she just went to the extreme and locked the children up. She just locked them up. No access to anybody. They are just locked up. It's not proportional. But after she have learned and she has increased her knowledge about disability of the kids, she started moving a step ahead. The kids can't have teeth, so she got them artificial teeth. And so our response is proportional to the risk the children are facing. And then she started working on the children to make sure that they are assertive. Now, the next pillar is what I call protection. Vulnerable children at risk should be provided protection from harm as well as support from harm. Protection. And one of the major way of protecting children from harm is to, first of all, educate them. Number two is to provide the basic needs that will make them navigate their day-to-day activities. If a child with disability needs a wheelchair, there is no need to tell the child to go to school when you cannot provide that wheelchair. It is dehumanizing enough for a child to be not to be able to move than for the child, and then you are allowing the child to be crawling on his bum to go to school. We need to take it one step at a time. Provide the wheelchair, provide the education, not provide the education and say, we are helping, we're the one helping. It is what we can do. So in your protection, you must also protect the dignity of the child. I have seen where people say they are helping people and they will make them line up for hours in the sun, all because of a bag of rice, or have a bag of rice, and then they make the video of this. This is not dignifying. Then the next pillar is partnership. Schools must commit to ensuring that they partner with relevant agencies, persons, to ensure that they protect children with disabilities in the their school. We are looking at protecting children with disabilities so that they will be able to go into STEM. But when we don't partner with the right people, when we don't partner with organizations like Age, then we can't protect these children. And when we can't protect them, we can't provide for them STEM education. And if you don't, what we will have in the next 10 years is that most of our children living with disability will still not have access to school. That's what we need to do. And then the last one, as I begin to round up, is what I called, and is very, very critical. How accountable are we to the way we treat children? How accountable are we the way we treat children in our own homes? How accountable are we in our organization? Do we frown 100% on any form of abuse against children? Ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few points that I want to bring to you this afternoon. And I also want to say that society, families, communities will be judged by the way they treat children, especially children with disability. We must begin to work hard. We must begin to work hard to ensure the protection of children living with disabilities in our communities. And I just want to give this opportunity, I want to give this challenge to Age Network to have a better understanding of the Disability Act of 2015, study it. No, I think 2018 or 19, sorry, for the wrong quotation. And then begin to understand and look at the provision as very special. And we must begin to look at them in that state and not see them as problem. Thank you very much for this opportunity. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Yeah, and with this, we'll be rounding up. Okay, with this, we'll be rounding up with today's workshop. Thank you very much, Mr. Kola, for that wonderful presentation. I know that our parents and teachers here, they've learned a lot about safeguarding their children, both at home and in school. Even our students, I'm sure when they get home, they'll be able to educate their parents, some of their parents too, about all this policy. Thank you very much. So, before we round up, just to know that we all are here and we have learned from this training, from this workshop. I would like us to be sharing with us what you have learned, or if you have a contribution, maybe a question from what our speakers has said so far. Please raise up your hand. Please. If you're online, raise up your hand. If you have a question or a contribution of what we have said so far, please raise up your hand. About addressing issues and barriers affecting children with disability, and also how to safeguard children with disability. It's very important. I think if we take care of that, there will be an inclusiveness in education in all we do. Okay, so a form has been shared online on the chat, but please, if you're online, please make sure before you go anywhere, please take down your name on that form, and also you can help us to fill okay. Okay, and also the survey too. Please, thank you. Okay, somebody has something to say. This is the administrator of this very school we are in here, the Adedoko International. Please, madam.
Today's program is quite interesting. Just that, I said the publicity, or I don't know how it's presented. We look as if it's just for one or two. Because I've been listening and going out, and I picked one or two things. How can we have children that are physically challenged so that they will be like others, right? And my contribution is like this. I think they say stream starts from the head to get clean, not halfway. If we can there should be a policy on, let's say, that can encourage them, we put in place so that it will be very, very easy for children in such ability. We see some of our pedestrian bridge. You see, we have the one that they slide. I believe it's because of people like that that they put such things. Maybe we bring it down to the education sector so that there will be a place that somebody can easily wheel in. It's not just in school, in churches, in mosques. How can they move with that's their wheelchairs? How can they stroll in comfortably? So that they will not feel, they will know that a plan has already been set in place for them. Not that when they come, we now start trying to say, okay, somebody should lift. Nobody needs to lift them. They just roll their wheel, go to the church, and they know our school, they know where to stay, and after the program, they move comfortably because they have been a structure put in place for them to stand or function effectively in such place. I believe with that, we are now making it, we are now moving ahead. We are now being proactive to accommodate that. With that such thing in place, seriously, we continue to see them being, they will fail, they will rage, they will not come out. Because there is no plan for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, my name is Mrs. Uche. Mrs. Uche Aruma Kalu. For the people that are looking for the first time, I'm the coordinator of ADDP International School Gaslight Campus. Thank you so much.
Thank you, our awesome coordinator. Yeah. Okay, so if you have anything online, please share, please, so that we'll be able to like communicate together. How can we address this issue of that is facing these children with disability, and how can we safeguard them both in school and at home? Please, let's share. Let's talk about it, at least to show that we've learned something from this workshop today.